Today on The Journey, we are going to the West Coast, and it's the place they call the Silver State, which is Las Vegas, Nevada. And we have got Cameron Ford with us today. Cameron owns his own canine company, which is Ford Canine. Cameron runs his own podcast, and I would highly recommend you guys go over and listen to it. He has all kinds of just a wealth of knowledge of the audience that he brings in. And the podcast is called Canine Talking Sense, and that is SCENT, scent, like we smell, the dogs smell, not common sense. And I'm telling you guys, the guests that he brings on, I mean, they're a wealth of knowledge. I try to listen to it regularly, and I think you guys will take so much from it. So, Cameron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, we're honored to have you on. Like I said, I've sat through numerous classes that you've put on back when, I don't know if it was bridge training or marker training. I don't remember what the class was called, but you were, that was some of the first classes. That's been a while back. I'd sat in some of your classes, and, I think the stuff that you're doing, especially with the cognition studies and stuff, and especially the ones that you've done with Dr. Hare from Duke. It just interests me. It intrigues me. And, man, I can't wait to pick your brain about it.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. Like you said, kind of going through a journey of teaching people about condition reinforcers. The business I do is heavily based in detection. And, detection has evolved a lot over the years. And one of the pieces that I brought in to talk about more frequently than it had been in the past was the use of condition reinforcers, a marker or a bridge, depends on what anybody wants to call it. The true term is a condition reinforcer. And how to use that best detection dogs. That was also a overlay into the journey of detection, which got me into the cognitive aspect, how dogs learn and the strategies they have for learning. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I got into it with thanks to Dr. Hare from Duke University, and it's really made a big difference in, information that we have to be better at training dogs.
Yeah. So before we get into that, Duke is only 2 hours from here. So I'm right in the southwest part of Virginia, and you can be in North Carolina in an hour. I can be in West Virginia in less than an hour. I can be in Tennessee in an hour and a half. I can be in Kentucky. Like, I'm right in that little hub. But yeah, Duke is only about 2 hours away. Of course, they're in our conference when we play ball. But Cameron, can you tell the listeners a little bit about you? I don't want to go through all your accolades because there's a long list of them, but just tell them who you are, what you've done, your history, and just give them an overlay of who Cameron Ford is.
Yeah, so I, got into dogs as a kid. My neighbor was a gentleman who trained police dogs, and then that had a profound effect on me. And then later in life, I ended up being in the military and worked as a military working dog handler in the Air Force, stationed in Germany, which opened up a lot of opportunities for me to do different things. Got to learn, different systems over there, got to work with German police, as well as I've got to go to this scent dog school over in Holland, one of the forensic schools there. And then those instances progressed me forward. And then as I progressed through the years, got into contracting. I was a police officer for a little while and did the police thing, and then got into government contracting. And more recently, I would say in the past 8 years, my last job that I had before I got into the private sector was working as a instructor for the Navy SEAL program. I was hired by a company called Cobra Canine. Cobra Canine had a contract, and they hired me to be a trainer on the West Coast. I did that for a little over 4 years, and that's kind of where the science world got in for me. And I had to be a better trainer. I couldn't just do things that I've always done when I was, do the typical police thing. And when you go into a special operations program, they expect results. And I really had to kind of up my game when it came to training. And the best thing is data and science helps out tremendously in learning those things.
Yes.
I have, experience is really helpful, and I had some good experiences throughout my life, but to kind of prove that something worked, I had to have the data behind it. And that's, in that time with that program, I got into more the science aspect. And in the past, going into my fourth year now in the private sector. And it's been a lot of fun. I focused highly, like I said, on detection. And that time with the Navy SEAL program is where I got to meet Dr. Brian Hare on the cognitive side of things. And that journey led me to Dr. Nathan Hall, the Canine Olfaction Laboratory at Texas Tech, Dr. Paula Tiedemann, Sam University. She does the chemistry and the forensic science aspect of it, and Dr. Lauren DeGrief and Dr. Lucia Lazarette. Even the list goes on and on.
Yeah, you have a
when it comes to
list
science. There's a lot of really great individuals out there who are working hard with research to help us be better, not only at learning our dogs, but what are our dogs smelling? What are our dogs detecting and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I got a question on when you was with the Navy SEALs. So was the scientific part something that you thought, hey, this is what's going to make me better? Or was it because they needed the data to function in that high capacity of what they're asking their dogs to do?
Well, it was kind of somewhat selfish in the sense that I wanted to be better, but I was held to the standards that my employer and that the Navy had when it came to performance, and it stemmed from watching a TV show. I was one of the days off watching Nat Geo Wild. It was a show called Is Your Dog a Genius? And that's where I saw Brian Hare on there sharing these different tests that he was doing. And I was looking at these tests going, wow, this actually has a really big overlay into what we do. And it was showing me there were some various gaps that existed in what we were doing. And maybe there was some information that this guy had that could help me be a better trainer so I could produce more reliable training or more reliable results, despite some of the crazy environments that these dogs had to work in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so was Dr. Hare, was he already attached to the SEALs, or is it something that you made contact with him and y'all hooked up that way?
Yeah, so I hopped on the good old interweb and looked around and see if I could, after seeing him on the show, could I find this guy's contact info, just searching the web. And sure enough, I did. I shot him an email saying, hey, this is what I do. This is who I work for. Would you be interested in helping us out? And luckily enough, and to my surprise, within like 24 to 48 hours, he emailed me back and said, I would love to help. We have done research before with the Marine Corps, things like that. So long story short was I got him hundreds of thousands of dollars through the Office of Naval Research to help fund this testing that we got into to help. Really, it boiled down to selecting better. And when we selected better, we had less dogs wash out. And then a byproduct of selecting better was we also had a 30% reduction in training time, just because we weren't spinning our wheels as frequently when before we didn't know why dogs were doing something. Well, now, thanks to some of that testing, we knew better why this occurred. And because of this type of dog, we would make adjustments to our training, which made us more efficient.
Oh, this is going to be so good. Yeah, so selection, and I talk about that. I've talked about it before. It helps the process. Like you said, it shortcuts the training, and the dogs don't, it keeps the dogs washing out. So, yeah, I can't wait to pick your brain on that. So tell us a little bit about the cognitive testing and what you guys, like I said, I know you two work together quite extensively on it. Tell the listeners about that. And then maybe we'll get into the selection and then the testing part, what we can do with our pups and our dogs to help the learning process.
Yeah. So it started off, like I said, my goal was to look at some of the training aspects. What was it that was happening in training? And Brian brought it back all the way to, well, this is what happens. You have to select and do this selection testing. you're able to better understand your dog's mind and how they solve problems, and problems being what we present to them in training, these different things. So he shared some of these tests that they had done with the Marine Corps, but nothing had ever been done with what we call multi-purpose canines, or similar to what a dual-purpose canine is, which was dogs that did bite work as well as detection. So they had done detection only, but not the bite work. So once everything was approved, I flew over to Duke University, spent about a week over there learning these different tests. Now, what was important was we still did our traditional ways of selecting dogs. We still did our typical tests. Now, the adjustments we made to those tests were the individuals who were testing were no longer allowed to stand near each other. What we did was, I wrote my notes, they wrote their notes and things like that. And then once we were done, we would convene and then we would look at what we had written down per dog. And of course, there's a lot of things that we saw the same way. But there were some things that we saw different. And then we had to have discussions about, how did you see that? What was it that you saw? Because what happens was, and this was Brian's point, when we are together standing in a group, we will tend to be influenced by somebody in the group, whoever that is. And instead of, say, speaking up and going, well, I see this, we just kind of go along with what the group says. And there's various psychological studies that show that all the time. So by being separate, there was at times things that might come up that someone saw that nobody else did, or that a few of us saw, and we had a discussion. So once we got through that traditional selection, we said, hey, we like these dogs. Once we did that, then we added the cognitive battery of tests. And what these did, in short, was show us, is this dog stronger in memory or is this dog stronger in inference? And inference is basically the dog's ability to look at the environment and figure out different things to use to problem solve to get whatever it is that they would want, or it's reinforcing or pleasurable, etc. So, and, dogs will tend to be stronger in one area or the other. And depending on the type of work that you do, that strength in a certain area is very helpful, or it just gives you information that you have to adjust so that way your training is optimal despite that dog strategy.
So can you break down a couple of those tests for us? What you're looking at, or how you test, and what you're looking for that test?
Yes. So we start off with the battery of inference-based tests. And it's something very simple as we show the dog something they want. Could be their food item, their toy item, whatever it is, that's really highly reinforcing for them. But on the ground in front of me, between me and the dog, is, let's just say, 2 buckets the size of a child's sand pail. And I walk closer to the dog, show the dog their item that they really want. I walk backwards, and then I go to my right side. And based on the score sheet will tell you which side you put it under. So you either put it under the right or you put it under the left, depending on what the sheet says. And that sheet is randomized. You don't know until obviously you're testing which side you're starting with. So anyway, you walk forward and you show it, you walk back. You always have the same rhythm, your pattern. Your pattern is always walk backwards, go to the right, then go to the left. Let's just say in this example, I'm going to load the right. So I show the dog the item, walk backwards, go to the right. I let the dog see me place the item under the right bucket. And then I walk over and just simply stand behind the left. And then I go back to center and I'll point to the left. So I'm going to point to the where it's not at. Does the dog follow my gestural communication and go to where I pointed, or will it go to where it knows its reinforcing or reward item is at? So ideally in detection, I look for a dog who's not as collaborative with me in that sense, where it knows where the answer's at, but I want it to go to that answer. I don't want it to go to where I point, because later on throughout training, I'm a dumb handler. I don't know where the odor's at. So I want the dog that goes, yeah, dummy, I know you want me to go there, but the odor's over here. So I look for that dog who is, let's say disobedient to my gesture, but in a different program with, say, assistance dogs or dogs that are trained heavily in directional information based on handler information. So let's say field work. I would want the dog to go to where I make a gesture. So this is, again, it's helpful information. What you do with that information is depending on what the dog's job is. So again, in my case with detection, I wanted the dog who disobeyed or didn't go to where I pointed and just simply went to where it knows the answer's at. And you do that test 6 times. And during those 6 times, you look to see, did the dog initially go to where you pointed and then adjusted and went to the reinforcing item? Because all you do is, once you say you go look and you point and you turn your head and you're facing the item that's, like I said, the not loaded side, in this case, the left side, you hold that gaze and that point until the dog makes a choice. Once the dog, let's say, runs over to the bucket that has the food or toy underneath it, then you can move again. So like I said, I'll recap it. I walk forward. I say, look, show the dog that item. I walk backwards, go to the right. If this is the side I loaded, I would load that side, let the dog see me load that side. I then go to the left side, just simply stand there for a second, come back to middle, and then point with my hand. And then with my face, look at the left bucket, say, okay. And when the dog is released to go forward, the dog is 10 feet away. The dog runs forward. And then in my case, I hope it picks the side that has the reward item underneath it. Or if they ran over the side where I pointed, as soon as they go to that bucket, the test stops. And like I said, you do that 6 times and you score that accordingly based on you're writing down the result of what side the dog chose. Now, the right and left is always going to be the administrator, the test administrator, the handler, basically. It's going to be your right or left, not the dog's right or left.
Right.
So that's just one of the tests that we do that tells us, is this dog heavily in gestural communication, or is it, willing to follow what its instincts are? And here's a key sentence I share to everybody when it comes to cognition. And that is, there is no other species on the planet that has the ability to read human communication and intention better than dogs. So no matter what primate that might be closely related to us, or a super smart dolphin or another animal, dogs possess this unique ability to understand us and communicate with us just at the same level as a young toddler. And that is really, really special and unique that dogs have this capability, which is different than other species out there. Can other primates communicate with us? Yes, but at the level that dogs can consistently understand and communicate us, they're the best out there when it comes to the various species that exist.
Yeah, I mean, they are super at reading body language.
Mm-hmm.
So just to ask a few questions about that. So I can see 3 different things happen, and I can see a dog that goes to your hand every time, which is not a bad thing if you're doing a certain context. I can see a dog that goes to your left hand 1 or 2 times, and as those 6 cycles work out, it decides this is not profitable for me, so I go to the right and I reward myself. Yep. Or you have a dog that is, I would say, and I'm going to ask you this, the dog that goes to the food source, toy source, whatever, all 6 times. So that would put for me, that dog is going to, for me, using it in our world to trail odor and find odor, which is the same thing you're doing. That dog doesn't really care what I think. He's going to do what his instincts tell him to do.
Yeah. And like I said, depending on the job that you want the dog to do, that is really helpful. Or let's just say, if I was doing directionals or assistance-based dogs, I want the dog who is going to collaborate with me despite, let's just say, that rewarding item being somewhat a distraction to them. They're willing to go, well, you say go here, I'm going to go here. And that's very valuable for a trainer of a certain type of job or discipline for a dog.
Right. Good. So when you and Dr. Hare done the studies, what did y'all come up with? What did y'all learn about cognition and what benefits it in the dog, or what benefits it for us to learn? And I know you just give us one example. What did you guys bring from that, and what has helped you raise, train, teach, everything that you do in the the law enforcement side of it. What has that brought to you?
Yeah. So like I was saying, we broke it into two categories. It can go much more in depth than that. And you can go to Dr. Hare's website. He's got his website. I think it's brianhare.net, and that's HARE.net. It could be .com, but in fact, as I sit here, I'll look it up as I talk. Or you can go to dognition.com. Dognition.com is a website where there's lots of various tests that people can purchase, a set of tests that they do, which is a little more in depth than what I do. Mine's very highly focused to the working aspect. So in any case, these tests tell us on the working side, is that dog stronger in memory or inference? And inference, I've looked up Brian Hare, so BRIANHARE.net. So his website has his books, has Dognition on there, so it's a one-stop shop location. So the tests that I do that tell me stronger memory, so like I said, I gave you an example of one of the inference tests, and there's 3 inference tests total. So there's another one, there's one after that. And then once I see the scores in the inference test, then we go to memory testing. And memory testing has time delays to these. So the dog would see you put something there, you block that the view of that item for 20 seconds or 40 seconds, and then you look to see when you remove that item, does the dog remember under which bucket was it under? And there's 3 buckets. There's a right, middle, and left. And the dogs are, they have 15 seconds to make the decision. As soon as they go to a bucket, right, wrong, or different, the test, ends. So if it's the wrong bucket, the dog is pulled back to that person holding the dog. If the test, of course, the dog goes to the right location, you allow the dog to get the reinforcing item or the reward. So we look at that information. Is this dog stronger in memory or stronger in inference? If I know it's stronger in memory, I have a dog that will default to memory first to solve a new problem or to gain their reinforcer. So many people have seen this in relation to location. So where something was placed previously in training, you could come back at a different day or week, and the dog will run right back to that location because it remembered where the last time it received a reinforcer. Some dogs are really good at this. Other dogs, you can have them go retrieve an item or go find an item, play with them, do whatever, and then do it again, and it's like they were never there. I joke around, I call those the 50 first dates dogs. They, every time they go out, it's brand new again. Even though they just ran it, it's brand new to them. So to know this information, to know a percentage score on how this dog performs in memory exercises versus inference exercises allows me to write up a training protocol that is much more efficient, so that way I can better prepare training. So I don't want to spin my wheels too much. If I know this dog is strong in memory, I need to change the context or that environment more frequently, so that way the dog is going to use another skill over its memory. Now, if I have a really good memory dog and that's valuable to me, so again, the retriever world, having dogs remember the locations of falls, that is a very helpful skill. It's a trait I really like to have, but it also can bite me in the butt depending on how I'm setting up training. So again, this information and the way we score it is, it's a percentage-based score at the end of the inference and at the end of the memory, and it tells me, is this dog percentage-wise high in memory, high in inference, and how high is it? And then, again, as a trainer or handler, I am going to set up training that maximizes my results or my plan, so this dog performs at its best and it accomplishes the objectives I have as a trainer to have this dog be successful, again, in whatever skill it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here just processing all this information. So, can you give? And I know we're talking about the detection world, but this would relate back to us and odor with what we do. Can you give me a short, just one thing that you would do difference with a memory dog in training? And I know that you said you would change the environment and we always. You hear people say short-term memory. You take a dog in a room and you hide it. Let's just use an example. You hid it in a light socket. outlet.
Mm-hmm.
The dog goes to the outlet, he rewards. You take him in the next room, he goes right to the outlet. And that's that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and what I would do is for a dog who's strong in that, in the early stages of training when we're just starting the association to a target odor, what I would do typically is after a day or two of this target odor being, let's say, a box, I then change it to a pipe. I change the outer containment so that way the dog starts realizing the one constant that they're looking for is that particular trained odor. Yep. So the more I change that context, they start to realize, oh, this is what is the constant, not the container. So I give another example. There's a lot of people that may have heard of Temple Grandin. She wrote a book, and it kind of shows the overlap between dog training and autism. And in one of the examples that she gives, it's for example, if I showed a autistic child a photo of a car and the car was blue and 2 doors, you said to the child, hey, this is a car. Well, then when I show them a different picture of a 4-door silver vehicle, they would say that's not a car. And the reason is they're very specific about what they associate and the context that they learn. So it takes time to generalize. So I have to show them numerous pictures and say, this is also a car. This is also a car. This is, they're different looks and different types of vehicles and so forth. So eventually they will generalize much better that this is a car, no matter what color it is, no matter how many doors it is. Is it a flatbed truck that's still considered a vehicle? Is it an SUV, a van? These are all automobiles. But it takes time to share that context because by default, they're going to be very specific. Well, dogs learn very much the same way. They learn through context cues. So in the context cue, a dog with strong memory, you say, this is what you're looking for. They may also take in a bunch of other aspects in how you presented it and said, this is the way that I understood this. Mm-hmm. So it could mean this odor in a box, that this odor that's packaged a certain way, that's been stored a certain way. Again, you don't know these other aspects of odor that are part of that odor profile. And what was it that the dog associated as the primary aspect? Well, then as you diversify this, it'll start to realize that the other things are background noise, but there is one constant thing that's present. In this case, let's just say I'm training a dog on a narcotic, and it's the narcotic chemical, despite the cutting agents, despite the box it's in, despite the plastic bag that the officer might have it in, if it was a police officer that was doing the training. All of these things, I have to get the dog to go, okay, those are irrelevant contexts. This specific part, the narcotic, is the thing we're looking for. So by constantly changing those things, and the only thing that they realize is the constant is that target, and that's the part that gets in the reinforcement, the better they are. But the problem that we do as trainers is we present many of those aspects in the same context, and very rarely do we separate them out so they learn that there's the one. Now, in the hunting community, there's very similar things, and I would say the hunting community is pretty good about changing the area, so where you're doing your searches or how you're presenting the target to the dog, whether it be the feathers that are being drugged behind, whether it be in a cage, all these things. And of course, what's even better in the hunting world is the other dogs who are much more seasoned do a much better job at teaching these dogs what to look for better than we do as humans. But in the world I'm in, it's all humans. Very rarely is another dog used to help train the dog. This is what you're looking for. This is what you're hunting for. So therefore, we have lots of errors and lots of things that we bring into the equation. So again, circling back to what makes this dog, if it's strong in memory, I have to be very careful that it's so strong in memory that it located or focused in on this particular specific item, whatever it is. And I have to do my best to diversify that so way it understands if it's not presented in that exact same way, it's still relevant. I still want you to tell me it's there, even if it's not presented to you the exact same way it's been in training, because you have such a strong memory.
Yeah, and I know that Chris and I have talked on this podcast several times about how much our dogs in the hunting world learn from each other. Like, another dog is the best teacher. And I'm so glad that you reiterated that without even us ever discussing that, because
No, yeah.
And we do change, like, the difference in like a memory, what you're talking about, the memory, like we're usually never in the same place twice, and especially out in the woods. We may be driving down the road with our dogs on top, or we may be walking through the woods, but our environment is continuously changing. So what I'm picking from you, Cameron, tell me if I'm right or wrong, just so our listeners are understanding this, and I'm making sure that we understand. The inference dog is one that's probably going to be a little stronger for us. Or would it be the memory?
Yeah, so again, depending on what you're doing in the hunting community or search community depending on the job, again, inference could be very helpful, obviously, because like you said, different environments, different things are changing. I would say in the retriever world, doing the field work, memory's probably going to be better because, once they see the falls, and then you give the line, you want the dog to kind of, stay true to that. Now, in a more natural hunting aspect, I would probably prefer the dog with stronger inference because, again, like you pointed out, the environment changes frequently, and they can't use a previous context cue, such as by a tree or in a bush, as something that will be relevant to them because it could be totally different this time. So, and those that have done hunting long enough have probably seen it where they've had that dog they trained that was just constantly going, let's say, from bush to bush because the last time they found something, it was in a bush, and they completely ignored the rocks or trees or things that are out there. So in those cases, they've experienced these things, and that's what I share about cognition is I'm going to share with you a lot of things that you might already know about your dog, but you will walk away going, oh, that's why the dog does this. Yeah. So those tests there, again, it's more about understanding the dog in front of me and being more efficient in how I communicate and how I train with that dog.
Makes perfect sense. So you said there was 2 more tests that you do. What are they short enough where you can tell us what they are?
Yeah, I can try to describe as best I can. So the next test is very similar to that first test, except I'm no longer pointing. I'm just placing an item on top of the relevant bucket. Now, the difference is on this test is the dog no longer sees. I have like a little screen, I want to call it, but it's just a piece of cardboard that's folded in a way the dog cannot see what's behind it. So I show the dog the reward item and then put it behind the technical terms called an occluder, but it's just think of it as it's a blocking screen or I'm just putting it behind a barrier. That's the best word. I'm putting it behind a barrier the dog can't see through. So I pull it behind the barrier. I then go to my right side, go to the left side, and I load the appropriate side, but the dog does not know because I have to do both sides the exact same way. So the dog doesn't know which side the reward item is under. Now, I walk forward again with a non-relevant object, so something like a little wooden block or a roll of duct tape or whatever. And now I still walk my same pattern. I still walk backwards and go to the right, then go to the left. And whatever side that's the loaded side is where the dog is now allowed to see me place this non-relevant item on top of the bucket. And then I go back to center and I say, okay, does that dog follow that, social cue, that item that tells them that this might be relevant to where there's something that they want? And so we score again. Does the dog follow that social cue, that item on top of the bucket as a way to solve the problem of this is where your thing is. This is the thing that you want. And that's that. We call it marker cue test. So the marker cue test shows that aspect. The next test is now we still use that barrier item, but now there's only going to be one bucket with the reward item underneath it. However, there's now 2 fabric circles that are about 12 inches in diameter. Obviously, it's big enough to cover the bucket. Is what it is. So we do. I joke around. I call it the doggy magic show. So when you place that barrier in front of the side, in front of your right side, left side, you raise the fabric up and you flip it like you're doing like a little magic show. But anyway, there's going to be whatever side has the bucket. So I got to go back a second. how we start this test is I walk forward with that barrier in my hand and their bucket. I let them see me drop their reward item into the bucket. That bucket goes behind the barrier. I then walk backwards and go to my right. I either act like or I cover the bucket on that side, and then I go to the left side and do the same thing again. And what the difference is one side is a flat piece of fabric. The other side is a fabric with a big bump over it. Mm-hmm. But what's happened is in test 1, the dog got to see you place the reward item, and all you did was point to the opposite side. Test 2, they lose sight of you putting out a reward item, and there's a social cue, an object, but the buckets are still there. Test 3, now the buckets are no longer visible. There is no bucket anymore as far as the dog's point of view. There's just a fabric with a big lump, and there's a fabric that's flat to the ground. And you're looking to see, will they make the inference that this thing over this side is different than the other side? Mm-hmm. Again, it's another form of a social cue, but can they understand that that's different than the other side? Mm-hmm. And there's some dogs that will go to the flat side the first 2 or 3 times and all of a sudden go, that didn't work. And then they go to the other side where that bump is, and they stay going to that side and they do really well. They made an inference partway through that test. And that's really relevant. It's good information that they say that, hey, this dog will figure it out partway through. It may take a couple times, but it'll learn. Other dogs just automatically follow that, hey, that's different, I'm going to go there. Other dogs just go to the flat side every time. So those 3 tests make up the inference-based tests that we do. And they're pretty simple. You would think that those 3 things would make all this difference in the world, but surprisingly enough, it does. It tells you a lot about how well. Plus, you're doing it 6 reps in a row. And some dogs fatigue, some dogs, while they wait for you to set as you're the administrators, doing the process, some dogs are barking the entire time. They're losing focus, which also tells you stuff like some dogs are going to lack a little mental flexibility because they get themselves too overly aroused as they waited. Yep. So again, very good information for you to have as a trainer, that it doesn't take much for this dog to get overly excited, which then inhibits their ability to problem solve because all they want to do is circle and bark or do whatever it is as that time went on as you progress through the tests. So again, very useful information.
Yeah, I can see, and I heard you say on a podcast, I don't remember which one it was, you was talking about, and I want to talk about persistence. How sometimes the more persistent dogs, not always what we want, because it causes problems down the road. But what age do you start doing this, or what is a good age to be able to do this, that we're not too young, we're not too old? What is the age range here?
Yes. So for these particular tests, we want a dog that's approximately 7 months or older, just so they have the mental maturity and enough focus to get through these testing cycles. Now, there is puppy cognition, and puppy cognition is basically from dogs that are 6 weeks to, on average, 12 to 14 weeks, depends on the size of the dog, because and the breed of the dog, because the testing space is much shorter. So if a dog is a pretty large dog by 16 weeks old, they're generally might be too big to do the test. So your sweet spot is at 6 weeks to, let's say, 12 weeks old. Generally, no matter what breed it is, they're the right size to do the test based on the testing size parameters. But the tests that we are specifically talking about, you're going to be 7 months to all the way until they're old. It doesn't matter. You can do these tests randomly throughout the dog's life, and you're going to always see that they're going to stay about the same. Their scores may change a little bit here and there, but overall, the big picture scope, the dogs will stay stronger in one or the other.
And is that like across the board? Is that so? If you tested a dog today and you test him 5 years from now, you should be you should get relevantly the same type of score.
Yes, I'll give you a scientific answer that scientists always say that should be the case. Yeah. There are always anomalies that show us, but as Dr. Hare would say, with the hundreds of thousands of dogs that have been tested and all across the different breeds, to include his own dog that gets tested almost weekly by grad students, the test comes out about the same each time with relative changes within the test. They might got the first rep wrong, the second rep wrong on the first time he did it. The next time he do it, they get the first two right, but the next one, but your score, your actual score, overall big picture will still lean to what the dog was when you first tested it. So let's just say it scored higher in memory, whatever that score was, versus inference. When you do that again later on, months, years later, you will still see that pattern show itself, with the exception of those few that are our anomalies. But believe me, a lot of these tests that we do, people have all kinds of questions about them, and I can tell you, we have tested it in numerous different ways, numerous different styles. Instead of pointing with our hand, we've pointed with our feet. We've faced our bodies. We've done all kinds of things. These tests have come down to be where the most of the data lands. This is where it's super helpful. There's going to be scores if you change something over here and over there, but it wasn't as predictable and reliable as the current method of testing that we follow now. And despite some little things doing this way, or despite a dog's previous training history, because there are things that dogs have learned through their training that prior to our testing that show itself. Like I said, the pointing. If you've done a lot of gestural communication to your dog will follow probably where you point. And it doesn't mean that that's important information. That's relevant to whatever it is that you do. If you are highly collaborative in the work that you do with your dog, that's great. That's perfect. That's exactly what you expected. If you wanted to do something different where you wanted more independence with a dog, well, then this is telling. This tells you that your dog does follow your social cues really well, and you may need to adjust training depending on that skill. You want that dog to be more independent. You may have to back off in other areas. I see it all the time where people can compete in various sports for dogs, and then they want to come to me and do detection. And when we do these tests tell me very quickly that their dog is the dog is very collaborative with their handler. And we may have to do some things in training that help get the dog to be more independent, but it won't always mean, let's say under stress, the dog will default to where they're most comfortable or their strongest reinforcement history. And that's going to be probably collaborative with you, and you just have to understand that. And again, it's relevant. It helps you again form, a training plan. Is one of the things I spent the past 2 weeks with my friend Simon Prince teaching people was you have to go into your training with a plan and what your protocol is. Don't try to figure it out while you're training. Have your plan set out ahead of time, so that way you can accomplish those objectives and then see what happens during those. Why did it happen this way? Oh, this was why. Maybe it's something I did, or like you said, or maybe it's the information that we now have from our dogs to know that, oh, yeah, this dog's got a strong memory and it proved itself again because lo and behold, I did something near a rock, or I put something in this way, or I had it set up in a bird launcher or whatever it was. And I realized through that was the 5th time I've done that in the past, they'd say 2 weeks. So it's very helpful and important for our data collection and for our training plans.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, our, training in the hound and the hunting world is our seasons dictate a lot of what we can do, but the stuff that you're telling us we can do in the off season. And I've always said that, I do a lot of hands-on and foundation work for my hounds, during the off season, and then when season comes in and I'm actually able to hunt, a lot of that stuff's worked out. Or like you said, I find out what I need to work on, next off season. Like, do I need to trash break the dogs, or do I need to work on, loading the dogs? The dogs like to ride up, So everything you're saying is, there's a place for it, what we do. The second thing I wanted to ask you talked about it earlier, was selection. So what tips, pointers, and I know we're still using dogs for nose work. Now, our dogs do need to, they got to have stamina. They've got to be able to cover ground and stay with the game, and they end up either treeing it or baying it. What are some selection tips that you had? And I know Ariel give us, some of her stuff that she uses. What are some tips that you may be able to give us on selection so we don't have those dogs wash out as much?
I mean, I would probably guess, even for you guys, not knowing your world as good as obviously I do in mine, but I would imagine environmental stability is going to be a very important aspect, being able to handle, other animal scents that are in the environment that don't freak it out. Obviously, being sure to shot, depending on what you're doing when it comes to, if there's firearms involved. Being able to be collaborative at a level that is helpful for you, whatever that level is. Do I want a dog that's, like I said, in field trial work, I want some significant collaboration with me and the dog because it knows to follow my cues or my directionals. Maybe I want a dog who's far more independent, that's going to be a hound that is way out in front of me, flushing or pursuing a target. And more importantly, I want a dog that can maintain its arousal levels. The dog that does not get overly stimulated with minimal amount of stimulation cue, whatever that is. Because obviously anything that's overly stimulated that just goes from 0 to 100 pretty quick is not going to be very mentally flexible. And in your environments are going to require a lot of quick mental changes. So various hounds need to make adjustments on the fly. If I got a dog who just loves to go get bay all the time and just while it's even searching and hunting, it's baying constantly, it may not be as proficient as a dog who can maintain focus, work, and then when it's time to bay at the appropriate, hey, I found it, boom, off we go. So, I would be looking for a dog who can maintain the arousal levels, know when to press on the gas pedal and when to step on the brake, without an overabundance of information coming from me. Obviously, I think, again, I don't know your world as well, but a dog that is just constantly worked up is going to have constant management. And the more management you're putting onto it inhibits what it should be doing because it's constantly trying to deal with your management style, whatever it is. Could be collar, could be lines, could be environment, whatever it is you're doing to keep this dog focused on the task at hand. Again, I want a dog who can come to it naturally and do my little different tests that I do, but maintain its excitement and arousal levels where it doesn't throw it in a red line, where now I've got to now manage that and try to control that and get it to where it's actually understanding what I want it to go do.
Yeah. One of the things I picked up, and I've like I said, I'm repeating stuff that I've already said through other podcasts, but I don't like my dog in red. I like my dog to have a calm mind, and that's exactly what you're saying. For our trail dogs, the dogs that's got to take that odor and work it and work it and work it, you can't have the dog that works erratic and there's no method to it. So what you're saying is spot on. So talk to me about being persistent. And I know that some of the guys listening to this are going to be like, no, I want that dog that'll stay after that bear for 20 hours. But when you go, we talk about slick treeing a lot, and when you said persistent, that's what brought to my mind. The dog goes in and he makes a tree, and there's no game there, and the dog that is persistent a lot of times won't work that problem out because he's sold on that object, on that box
they're
or whatever.
over aroused. Yep. So the dog that's overly aroused or overly stimulated, it looks good because we perceive that many times that that's really persistent, and there's truth to that. However, for example, from the Navy SEAL community, we don't want guys that are spun up and overly, let's say, egotistical or overly driven. There's a frequent saying used in that community, and that is calm breeds calm. Because when the shit's going crazy around you, I don't need somebody that goes batshit crazy with it. I need somebody that can manage their emotions, focus in on the task, and do the job. I kind of want the same thing in my dog. If I'm going to track something for an extended period of time, I don't want a dog that blows this wad right out the gate. I want a dog that's like, okay, I got it. I'm running it. Okay, I've lost it. Okay, where is it at? Okay, this whatever this is went up this tree, but it's no longer there. Where else can I go? And as quick as it can, it adjusts and looks for another opportunity or another answer to what's in that environment. So But if they're overly aroused, and again, on a short test or something that's only a few minutes long in an evaluation, that can fool us as trainers and handlers and think, oh, wow, that dog is really, really motivated. It'll follow something really well. But then all of a sudden, when we have to go out there for, let's just say, an hour or 2 hours, and that's still short to some of these hunts, that this dog is smoked in the first 30 minutes, or it can't get out of its own way because it was convinced that the item is here, or the prey item is there and it's no longer there anymore, but there's still scent there. It doesn't understand because it hasn't tried anything different that there could be another answer to solve that problem. And the old saying is, what's the definition of insanity? Repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? So I want that dog who has that level of motivation but is clear-headed to go, okay, like I said, it knows how to moderate the gas pedal. It knows how to work itself up when it needs to, which is usually when they're, about ready to catch the prey or signal that they found the prey. But I don't want the dog who's just so excited to find the prey, it just can't stop it. Oh my gosh. And then it just stays going crazy. And then all of a sudden, after about X amount of minutes, it has a hard time maintaining itself, as opposed to the dogs that are more balanced. Again, in the operations community, I don't want the guy who's going crazy and trigger happy and you're out. If that's the kind of, personality you have, you will not last long in that community. You need to have stability, be able to focus when everything around you is going crazy, or when the initial plans that we wanted to go by go to hell. I need to be able to adjust fire pretty quickly and make these changes that get the job done. And I need a dog in many cases that can do a lot of those same things, that can be at the right level of motivated, but knows how to pace it and solve the problem. The environment changed. Oh, now we're at a water crossing. What do I do? Oh, let's try to get around it. Let's go through it, versus the one that's just going to run like reckless abandonment and jump in the water and go across when all the animal that its prey did was go to the left or go to the right and avoided the water, things like that.
Yeah. So is there a test in particular that you do to gauge that? Is there something off the top of your head that you would think about?
I mean, there's not necessarily a particular test. I just present their, reward items, and I do things how I play, because my environment's different at every place I go test a dog. So I just present that item. Sometimes I put it behind a barrier that it can see through the barrier, let's say a chain link fence or something like that. It's items on one side, the dog's on the other side. I'm looking for a dog that stays persistent, even if I walk away. If I go away from there, they stay there. They are still attentive at it. I don't necessarily want the dog who stays biting at the fence, biting and pulling and doing whatever. I want the dog that may try to get over, may try to work its way. It's going to try different things. If I see it trying, like maybe digging, maybe going around, maybe lo and behold, 6 feet down to the left, there's actually an opening to the fence that they didn't know about. But because they tried different things, that's what I'm looking for. And I want them to do that despite me being there. I might be there initially, and then again, I'm walking away, because I'm looking for them to stay after it despite where my presence is at. There are some dogs that are going to go to you and say, hey, help me figure this out. And again, depending on that job, that it could be a great answer. For some of the things that I do, and I would imagine in the hunting community, I want a dog who tries to figure out how to maybe get around or through or whatever, but not keep trying the same thing over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many visuals I have with what you're saying, the dog's behavior, and just sitting back, giving the dog a challenge, because that's basically what you're doing, and seeing how the dog takes that challenge and works it out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
And
that's the biggest thing.
I do not like the spastic dog. I just do not.
It's more work.
Yeah.
You're putting more work into areas that aren't what the job really is.
Right. Yeah. Well, Cameron, how is there anything that you'd like to add on the cognitive side of it? Anything that, what your takeaway for us that we could take away from what you've told us?
Yeah, I mean, I would share with everybody, if you learn these cognitive tests, and I do seminars on it. I actually have one of my employees that works with me. She was part of the original cognitive testing staff for these dogs at Duke University. Then she went to Auburn University and did more things there. But so now she works for me, and I send her out at times to share this. But the most important thing I want to share, everybody, is if you actually go out and learn these tests and apply these tests, it doesn't matter what job you have, because these tests are telling you, multiple different ways, information about your dog that will make your training more efficient for you and your dog. So I just highly encourage people to seek out and go learn about cognition through, Brian Hare's website. They can contact us at fordcanine.com. They'll actually see when we're doing seminars on cognition. Ironically, I'm going to be in North Carolina. I believe it's going to be in Henderson, North Carolina at Next Level Kennels in about 3 weeks. I think it's the middle of July, I believe 22nd, that weekend, whatever that is. Yeah, I'll be over there doing a cognition seminar there. So we go around and we share, these seminars for all types of people. Cognition does not matter what the dog's discipline is. It's important information for you to know how your dog problem solves its world. Yep. Is it memory, or does it try things? And I think, like I said, the point I want to stress is the more you know this, or you apply this information to your training, you're going to be way more efficient as a trainer. You're going to just understand your dog better. You're going to get into your dog's mind and kind of have the user manual to how that dog works. And that's super helpful no matter what we do.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it just knowing what people need to understand, just knowing what you should and shouldn't be doing, or how you should do things, makes a world of difference. It makes the training so much easier. And it saves time. Like what you said, it just saves time. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Henderson.
The more you know your dog, the better you're going to be.
That's
so it's all about knowing your dog.
And that's stuff that you can do. Like, you can do that, one evening when it's rainy. Bring the dog in your basement or your garage and do the test. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a YouTube video when you were at Ridgeline. Of the cognitive, you use the cardboard and the three sand buckets. People, and I'll try to add that to the notes of the podcast, but I'll put a couple of links. I was going to say, we're in the middle right now of filming all of this to be an online course. So probably in the next, I would say 30 to 60 days on the Ford Canine website, there'll be a link to the Canine Cognitive Battery of Tests with videos and instruction and the PDF files for how to set it up and the procedures for it. The hardest thing that I had for the longest time of sharing it, digitally was, trying to problem solve or forecast all the human errors that are made. Yeah. So after a couple of years of doing this now, generally speaking, people give me the same typical errors. So now I can kind of share, hey, make sure you don't do this. Mm-hmm. Or if you do this, here's your problem solve. Here's how you either start over again, or you continue on, just, understand that this score might look different on this repetition. So, But in any case, that stuff will be available online through the website. That's just my last name, FORDK9.com. So FordK9.com will have that. But you're right. There is some YouTube videos where I've shared some of the tests. So it's just part of them. The hard part, again, is I don't want to give somebody a little bit of a test and then they go, oh, I got it. And then you're only getting part of an answer. I'd rather you get all the answer. You want all the information and get all the data, not just part of it. Yeah. Yeah. Phenomenal. Well, I think you guys should probably go check that out. I know that, I will, because I want to learn and I want to do better and make the dogs better. So, Cameron, I really appreciate you taking the time and sitting down with us today, and I hope the listeners get something from it. And like I said, I just can't tell you how appreciative we are that that you took the time to come on. And usually you're the host. I mean, if you listen to your podcast, like all kinds of them. So I really appreciate your time, and I hope the listeners do too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm happy to do it. And like you said, hopefully we'll gain some listeners that want to know a little bit more about detection. Like you said, my podcast, Canines Talking Sense, we just try to share. My goal on that podcast is to put listeners in in a position to hear from other experts, from chemistry to biology to, like we were talking about before the episode, Craig Koshik, who comes from your guys' world, who's a ton of knowledge. So I shared to the listeners of the detection dog world why some of the breeds they have do what they do and where they came from.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you guys have your podcast, and everybody's goal should be to be better as handlers and trainers of our dogs.
Yep. And like I said, he was a wealth of knowledge, and hopefully we can hook up with him and Bart and get one done ourselves. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. At the end of every podcast, we end it with, Cameron, thank you for helping us find a way to teach, train, and learn.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you, guys.